Let's talk about the booking basics. We want to go through what you need to remember and have in place. Okay, so you need to develop a process. And the reason for this is having a process that you do every time you create a quote is important. Having a process you do every time you make a booking is important. And having a process allows you to make it better. If you have nothing down as your process, you can't fine tune it. You can't make it better. You can't see where there's holes. You can't see where you're making mistakes. You can't see how you can do it quicker and better and where you can improve upon it if you don't have anything in place. So it's important to develop it because you want it to start off as a basic process and grow it and make it better. So I'm going to break down 3 parts of the process: the request, the presentation, what you're presenting to the client, and then your follow through. And the follow through is really important. And sometimes we miss it because we're so focused in on the quote that we don't always remember about the follow through, or once they get back from travel, what are we doing? So let's talk through these 3 things. So here's a little diagram to try to help you to think about what you need. So first part of all of this is collection of the data. So let's talk about how you'll collect each stage. For the travel details, how are you going to collect what the client needs a quote for? You want to have it so it's set up on a form, or if you want to talk to them in person or on the phone, you want a form in front of you to fill out and know what to ask. Because if you're just going by memory, you're going to forget something. I still forget things, and I've been doing this forever. So you definitely want something that you go through and you ask all those questions, and you ask it of everyone. So you're asking for details so that you can do your quote as efficiently as possible. Then you also need to collect the client details. So this is the important: your name, your date of birth, do you have a passport, all that information that hopefully what you're going to do is take it and put it somewhere. Agent Made is an example. And then you're going to have that information to use for future trips or quotes. You're going to have it handy because you might be going back to it. For example, you might have something that you're working on and you typed it all into the system and the system goes down. And so you want to have something that you can go back and get all that information, because you can never rely on taking it over the phone or writing it on a piece of paper. You want some place to collect it and keep it so that you can use it for future time. Then the payment details. How are you going to collect it? If they say, yes, I want to do this package, then how are you going to collect it? Are you going to use AgentMate and use the Pay Now feature, which is a great way to do it? Or are you going to have a form, which hopefully is PCI compliant because it needs to be legally okay for you to be collecting the credit card information? AgentMate is. So think about that. How are you going to collect that information? If you're going to take it over the phone, consider the fact that you need to make sure that you're writing down the numbers correctly and all that information. Then at the tail end of it, so how was the trip? How are you going to collect that information? Are you going to call them? Are you going to send an email? Are you going to have a form? Are you going to ask for those reviews? Because those reviews are great for agent profile. So you have to have that set up on how you're going to do that. All right, then let's talk about how you're going to present it. So here we are in present mode. Are you going to use Travefy? Are you going to use AgentMate? How are you going to present what you built for them? You need a way to do that. So um, think of that and develop what you think you want to use. Some agents are using Travefy, some are still using AgentMate, some are created their own. It's all up to you and how you want to present it. Then you also need to present, as part of it, is the client details, because that's where you want them to say, oh no, my name is spelled this way, or oh no, actually my last name is with a hyphen. Those kind of things, you want them to see it and be able to fix it before we get to that payment stage, ideally, because that's when the problems come in. So you want a way to present their information. So make sure you think of that too, because sometimes we give that quote and we're not thinking about presenting to make sure that the data that you have on them is correct. So then if they do pay, you need to be able to show them documentation that they paid. AgentMate is a great resource on that to show that they made payments and what is due. It's important to make sure that if they're just paying a deposit, that you have a way of documenting and showing that they still owe money. So keep that in mind too. And then how are you going to present those reviews you're collecting? Are you going to have it as part of your agent profiler? Are you going to put it on your website? How are you going to use it? If you're collecting it, you'll want to be able to use it some way. So think of that. All right, then the last part is documentation. So all this data that you're collecting and the trips that you're creating, everything is great to keep. So how are you going to keep that information? How are you going to keep what your client did, where they traveled, where they stayed, all that information? You'll have it in AgentMate if you enter it, which is great, but not all agents are entering all the details. So where else are you going to keep it? Do you have a CRM? Do you have a file folder in your desk that you just put down all the information? That's fine too, but you want something. Again, with your client details, where are you keeping that information? Are you just using AgentMate to do your commissions, therefore you're not using the putting in all the details? Are you putting all your notes on a sticky note and then you're throwing it away when you're done instead of recording that person's passport information so that you have it for next time? Dates of birth, maybe you want to send cards out for birthdays. All that information, the client details, where are you keeping it and what are you doing with it? Payment details, same thing. Be careful keeping credit card information. You do not want to keep it somewhere that someone can get a hold of it, because you will be responsible for it. So make sure you're following the rules on that. AgentMate is fine for that because it does not keep the 3-digit code that you cannot keep with a credit card. So if you are storing the information, be sure to be careful on that, because you definitely don't want someone's credit card information being compromised and it being on you. So then, how was the trip? How are you keeping that documentation? Again, if you're asking the questions, you need to be collecting that data and keeping it somewhere. It's awesome that you're first asking the question, but then if you're not keeping it, then you're doing a disservice to yourself. So definitely want to keep it. So let's talk about this collection of info. I'm saying collect, collect, collect. Why? So why is it needed? You want to ask all the questions you need so that you don't have to continue to go back to the client. Nothing's worse than having to keep going back like, oh, well, what's this? What's your passport? What's your date of birth? What's your middle name? What's your, you keep going. You don't want that info. You want it all in one swoop if you can, because after a while it gets daunting to you and to the client. So it's better to get it over quick and easy and make sure that you don't want to be waiting on them to respond to you. So how can it be used? Keeping record of what you have requests on. allows not only for marketing, but also for you to learn what is popular and what you might learn more about. So if you're seeing that you've last 5 requests have been for Hawaii and you don't feel like you know Hawaii well enough, or maybe you're seeing a trend. Maybe it's time to do some marketing on Hawaii because people are wanting to go to Hawaii. It's that data that you're collecting that will help you. And you might also think, okay, well, Hawaii was popular this year, but might not be popular next year. So what should I be marketing for? It's just collection of data. So let's move on to that presentation. So you've gotten quotes, you've worked with your suppliers, hopefully your inner circle suppliers, and you have a quote to give. So these are things to consider with your quote. How clear is it? Is there any way for them to misinterpret what you're saying? Make sure it's clear. How attractive is it? Now, some agents do very basic itineraries, and that is fine. But if you feel like you need something a little prettier, that's where you might be looking at Travefy or some other options. The main thing is you want it to look professional and you want people to clearly be able to see what the quote is. Another thing to consider is how long does it take you to do it? If it takes you a full day to do a quote, that's not good. Those people do not want to wait a full day for you to give them a price for a trip to Cancun. So keep that in mind. It is better for it not to be super attractive and quicker than for it to be really fancy, but it took you 3 days to get back to them because they might be gone. They might have already booked it and it's a waste of your time. So just remember that. It's better to maybe learn, if you're going to use Travefy, learn it beforehand so that you're not taking forever to get a quote back. It should never take you 3 days, especially with Travefy, but it's something to consider. If you are challenged to get that done, find something that works well for you. And maybe work with a supplier that has already something in place for the quotes. For example, ALG Vacations, is they've got quotes that you could just use, and that might save you some time. So keep that in mind. Pro tips. Time is important. The quicker you can quote, the better. Wasting time learning how to use a program is not in your best interest. Which I need to fix that spelling. All right, so then let's go to your quote basics. Your itinerary. So your itinerary, you need your dates, your destination, your room or category cabin if you're doing a cruise, your price, your upgrade options. Yes, offer those upgrades because you do not know if someone would like to go with the ocean view instead of the inside, or say, and if they've got a basic room, offer them the next room up. You never know. A lot of people are upgrading themselves, so make sure you offer those. Your insurance options. Always, always, always quote insurance. You might feel funny doing it at first, but if you get into the habit of always quoting it, people will either take it or not take it. I just did a quote with someone and I offered them, and I really didn't think they were going to take it, and they jumped right on it. So don't assume they're not going to take it. It's better for you to quote it and them to deny it than for them to come back later and say you never offered it to them. Things to be careful about. You really want to put on your quotes cancellation penalties, the dates required for deposit and final payment, and you want them to double check it all. So I always put on there, double check, make sure things are right. Those are things that I always say because I want them to know that I want their approval. I want them to say, yes, this is what we wanted, because it really helps me later down the road if there's ever a question. I can go back and say, I sent it to you, you approved it. If it was wrong, that was where you needed to say it was wrong. Again, double checking. Your names, are they the same as on your ID? Double checking with ages. They might qualify for a discount. You might not think that someone is a senior, or if they are military, something that might give them some discounts. So ask the questions. Do they have special needs or accommodations that are needed? Dietary, do they, need help getting to and from something? Do they need to be on the first level of a hotel because they can't do stairs? Those are the kind of questions you need to be asking, and double check. Ask. It's okay to ask. We're getting to know our clients. Okay, so how do you collect credit card? Electronically is ideal because then you don't have to worry about that you made an error or there's a mistake. The feature in HM8, the Pay Now, really helps with that because it saves the credit card information for you. And also, then you don't have to worry that you wrote down a 7 when it was supposed to be a 9. It, it allows you not to have to go back and say the credit card's not working. So phone, it's okay to collect credit card information via phone. However, you still need to have some sort of written documentation from the client that they approve the charge. Because if they dispute it and you are just saying, well, I talked to him on the phone, that's not good enough. So you need something that shows that they approved for them to be charging the card. This is especially true if it's someone who's not on the booking. If you have a client that says, oh, my mom's paying for me, you need to get documentation from the card holder that they approve of it. Because when a supplier comes back to us and asks for documentation when they dispute the card, you are going to be out of luck and you're going to end up having to pay for things if you don't have documentation. So make sure you have documentation. So, how to minimize the risks and errors, because we all can make them. It doesn't matter. I still make them, especially when you're super busy or distracted or you're having to make lots of changes. So always think of these things to minimize those risks and errors. Electronically is always ideal, right? Because you don't have to worry about it being your error should there be a mistake. You should always have them sign off on things. You should ask the client to double check everything. If you're doing it by phone, they can't double check it. They can't make sure that you spelled their name right and dates of birth is right. So if you're doing your business by phone mainly, you still need an electronic way of getting them to approve things. So you should be offering insurance, and when they refuse it, you should document it. Everything should be documented because you don't need it until you need it. And it's a bummer for agents when they get to a point where they have somebody who's fighting them on something and they have no documentation. So document, document, document. So phone, again, it's the highest risk for you as an agent. It will become a you versus them situation if there's a problem. Find a way to get approval in writing always. So if you've got somebody who really, doesn't want to do electronic, that could be even a sign of you have to worry about it. But, protect yourself. Okay, so after every quote and booking, we're going to do these things. So after the quote, we're going to follow up. We're going to make sure that they got that quote, because don't assume they got it, especially if you're using a supplier website or even HM8 sometimes. Their spam folder might grab a hold of it for whatever reason. They might not see it. So follow up, make sure that they got it. Ask them if they have questions. Sometimes people are fearful to ask questions. So put clear lines of communication and say, hey, do you have any questions on this? Can I help you in any way? So the follow-up's important. For your accounting checkup, you want to make sure that's entered into AgentMate. Even if it's a quote, get it in there. It'll save you time later on when you do make the booking. And if it doesn't happen, turn into a booking, that's okay. It can be a quote in the system. You can do things just as a quote instead of a booking, and that way there's something in there. And you should always examine your process. So after the quote's done, you should be looking at, what could I have done differently? What could I have improved on? What struggles did I have? What took the most time? So consider that after your quotes. Just to make a little mental note to yourself what you could be doing differently so that maybe you can get it set up before you do the next quote. So before the trip, if it's a trip, you need to follow up, ask them if they need anything before the trip. You could offer last minute travel insurance. You could offer short excursions or activities to do within destination. You've got lots of places here that you could, make sure that they don't need anything before the trip. In your accounting, you want to make sure that did you show full payment in AgentMate? If they're traveling, they probably should have paid already. So make sure that you're showing that full payment because that's going to help with getting paid your commission. Again, you're going to examine it. What's working? How can I do it better, quicker, whatever? Just examine your process for a client before the trip. And then we have after the trip. You want to follow up. How was your trip? Concerns, feedback, ask for reviews. Your accounting, you're going to check to make sure that, again, that you showed full payment, but also has the commission come in? And do you need to fix anything with the commission? What if the commission came in and it's a different amount? You want to get that fixed. So always follow up. After a booking, follow up with your accounting. And again, you're going to examine, this person has now had a quote, they've traveled, and they've come back. What could you do differently? And if you had any issues, how can you fix them? If the client had issues on the trip, what can you do? Things like that. How can you make sure this client comes back? What things could you be doing to make sure that you have a repeat client? But also, on the same token, do I want this client again? Was this client a horrible, horrible client that drove you crazy? If so, put that in the system. Maybe next time they need a quote, you don't do it or you charge them a service fee. So again, look at the process. It shouldn't be just that you're doing it and you're never looking at how you're doing it. So here's some resources. I've told you all these things that you should be doing, but how are you going to do these things? So again, AgentMate, you're going to be using AgentMate on every single booking. And the reason is that because that's how you're going to get paid. But it's more than that. You can do itineraries, you can do pay now, you can keep your client data, you can use it once you put that client data in there. We have marketing through engagement. So AgentMate has a lot more things than just getting your commission paid. So keep that in mind. Travefy. There's lots of information we have out on Travefy. We have a webinar coming up with Travefy. So make sure you look at My Due Online. And you can also just go to Travefy. They're great. They'll work with you. But those are for the itineraries. You can also do forms with them to collect client data. And you can do marketing with them. They have websites. They have different things. So keep them in mind for all this stuff. Then you also have JotForm. So JotForm you can use for data collection. We use it for a lot of our data collections if you haven't noticed. You can do credit card collection with PCI compliance. Make sure it has that. So again, that's another resource is JotForm. Travel Industry Solutions. Now, this is for legal documents and waivers. It will help you with disputes. This might be something you want to consider. We are going to have a webinar on it, but we also will keep that webinar in if you're watching this after we've done the webinar. But Travel Industry Solutions is a great place for that stuff. Email me form. So, Email Me form is something that a few of our agents are still using. Their forms for data collection and waivers also. So, that's definitely still a resource for agents. A lot of agents have been using JotForm instead or just using AgentMate. However, it's still a great resource. So let's go through the checklist. You are going to get your travel collection. You're going to give your quote presentation. You've got to do your credit card collection. You've got to manage your trip details, including commission. You have client interaction before and after a trip. And you have marketing to past clients and quoted clients. So those are the things that you need to figure out a process for. All of this is needing your process. And it's your process. You get to decide how to do it. How I do it might not work for you. How another agent does it might not work for you. But finding something that works for you and that you can build on is so important. So again, having a process allows you to improve upon it. And that's what we should always be striving for with our businesses, is how to make it better, how to do things better, how to do it faster and better. And if you don't have a process, how do you make it better? So don't be scared to create one, because it really is better for you to know how you're going to do it and develop it. And it will get easier every time you do it. So start thinking about all the items that I listed, and hopefully it won't be too overwhelming to get started with your process. If you ever need help with a process, please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to give you ideas and suggestions. We all on the team do things a little differently, so we have experience in different things. And we do have the Business Bootcamp webinars and information that are in my DU Online. So go ahead and take a look at those, and we hope this helps.